All right, it is just after 1, so we will go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Abby Hughes. I am project manager here at Nonprofit Association of the Midlands. We are so excited to have Matt Lehrman back for how to sustain donors during turbulent times. If you missed his first session a few weeks ago, we do have a recording up on NAM's YouTube page to share. So we are super excited to have this session back. The first one was wonderful. Just a few quick Zoom reminders before we get started. We are using Zoom webinar today. So your cameras and microphones are turned off, but we will be using the chat feature and Q&A to make it as interactive as possible. So again, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. If you have questions at all during the session, go ahead and send those in through the Q&A. We will have plenty of time at the end of the session for questions. This webinar is being recorded and will be available after. I will send out the recording to all registered attendees after, and you're welcome to share with your networks. I think that is all. I'm just reading my notes. I think that is all that I have as reminders. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Matt to start our session. Thank you.
Thanks, Abby. And just confirming you can see and hear me, right?
I can.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Actually, it's still good morning from Arizona, where it's going to be about 115 degrees today. So it sounds like it would be kind of nice to be in your neck of the woods, but happy to be here with you. We are going to talk about how to sustain donors in turbulent times. You're going to ask me the question, can you get a copy of the slides? And of course, the answer is yes. I'll tell you how to do that when we get to the end of the presentation today. What I think I want to tell you first is grab your cell phone. If it's not handy, you've got about 2 minutes before you're going to want to have it in your hand. We're going to do a little bit of interactive things. Zoom is good for some things, but I think we could do some other things as well. And we're just going to have some fun and try some other stuff. So grab your cell phone. I'll tell you how to use it in just a moment. Let's recognize that we are in a moment of disruption and stress for ourselves and for our organizations. Oh, and look at that. My PowerPoint just crashed. So hang on a second. Usually, hang on, I'm going to just reboot that PowerPoint and come right back up. Hey there, Abby. Sorry about that.
No worries. Take your time. Zoom always is fun.
You know why? Because we jinxed it and we said we got everything under control.
We did. We were all on early, ready to test everything.
This has happened to me before, but it's never happened while I was actually delivering the presentation. It only happens when I do the preparation for it. So
no worries.
I thought that I was in good shape. All right, let's see. Do you see my PowerPoint screen? All right,
all good.
Cross your fingers. Hopefully we're now jinxed. So we're in a moment of disruption and stress, just like that. And my point is to say that we have to resist the temptation to call this the new normal. I don't think this is the new normal. You'll know we're in the new normal when we can organize for the near future and we can plan for the long-term future. But I've been asking a lot of people running a lot of nonprofit organizations, and no one feels like they can plan much beyond 30 or 60 days. And because of that, I choose to call this the raw normal. And it's called the raw normal because our job is to understand what's going on around us because it's changing fast, to make adjustments on the fly, and frankly, just to survive the day. And so this is more about tactics than it is about strategy. That's why I call this the raw normal. So what I'm going to offer you today is what I call an espresso shot. It's just going to be a highly caffeinated download of 12 tasks. It's going to be about 24-ish minutes. I'm going to try a couple of new things on you today. So give me an extra 4 or 5 minutes just to squeeze everything in. But let me manage your expectations. You might look at this at the end and say, well, this is just systemized common sense. And you know what? If that's all that it is, I'm fine with that. The goal is to make sure that we haven't missed anything along the way. But if I'm not teaching you something fundamentally, radically new, just bear with me and make sure that you've got all the basics taken care of. I care mostly that what we're going to go over today is actionable for you, that you can do something with it. After my little presentation, we'll have Q&A. We'll talk for as long as you want. And again, I'll tell you how to get the slides at the end of our presentation. Okay, you got your cell phone handy? Good. Here's what I'd like you to do to participate. We're using an app online called Poll Everywhere. And all you need to do is send a text message. So to the number 22333, you're going to text the word public, P-U-B-L-I-C, to the number 22333. Just text the word public. Nothing is going to happen after that. Let me just also say, I'm not going to capture your text. I'm not going to be sending you text messages afterwards. Your information is anonymous-ish, which means we're going to ask you to share comments that are going to be made available publicly, that is to other people on this webinar. But if you misbehave, if you do something that's rude, crude, or whatever, I do have the ability in the poll to go back and see the phone number that sent it. But I don't intend to do that unless you've misbehaved in some way. And of course, if you've got a text messaging plan where you pay for your text messages, your own text messaging service charges may apply. But there's nothing that I charge or that Poll Everywhere charges out of this. Okay, so did you send your to the number 22333? You sent the word public. You should then have gotten back a message that says you've joined Matt Lehrman's session. So here comes the first question I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you just to send back one word, just one word answer to this question. I want to know, what's the mood of your donors in this moment? Just what's the mood of your donors? Once you're into the Poll Everywhere, just send a text message back with that one word. What's a word that describes the mood of your donors in this moment? And do you see what's happening on the screen? As you send in the words, we create a word cloud together. And look at the words that you've said. Your donors, their mood is distracted, tentative, curious, uncertain, supportive. Oh, if more than one person types the same word, that word tends to grow. That's how word clouds work. So apparently 2, maybe 3 of you have said the word supportive. So curious, uncertain, generous, selfless, cautious, distracted are on the board. Supportive is big, and tentative is probably in second place. You know what? Let's do this one more time. Just go ahead and enter another. You can enter the same word if you want to vote for it again, or if you want to put another word into the mix here, or you want to vote for someone else's word, go ahead and do it one more time. Let's just see, what's a word that describes the mood of your donors? You can vote for a word that's already there or add something new. Let's just make sure that we've got a kind of a good overview picture of what your donors are. So a number of you clearly, voted for that the mood of your donors is supportive, which is great to hear, but they are still tentative and uncertain. They are, they're anxious. That's a new one on there. You've got donors who are hesitant, I see, is really important vocabulary. I see the word generous is trying to pop up into a larger place. You're obviously very appreciative of the donors that have been doing work for you. So this is really good. I'm going to stop here. We're going to do another word. So this was, what's the mood of your donors? Now I want to ask you in this next question, again, for a one-word answer, I'd like you to tell me, what is the mood within your organization right now? What's the mood in your organization? It could be your staff, it could be your board, it could be your volunteers, just however you want to define. It could be your own personal mood. Maybe you're a one-person operation. What's the mood within your organization right now? Cautious and concern are the first ones that get voiced. Uncertainty, motivated, nervous, concern. I'm going to invite you to vote twice here as well. You can vote for your same word again, or you can vote for a different word or put something new on the board entirely. Let's kind of fill this screen up a little bit. I really want to know, what's the mood going on in your organization right now? Concern and cautious, uncertainty. Oh boy, uncertainty just came out of nowhere, and it's big. Cautious, concern, uncertainty, but look, determined, frustrated, burnout. These are tired. These are real words. I totally understand where you're coming from here. So we're going to have to just take this moment to understand that between the mood of our donors and the mood going on within our organizations, we have this responsibility, maybe even this opportunity, to take on 12 tasks for donor relations. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. I keep watching, and since the screen keeps changing, that means more words are coming in. I don't want to cut anyone off, but I'm going to give you 5 more seconds, and then we're going to proceed. Look at the words that you ended on here: cautious, conservative, anxious, uncertainty, and concern all rise to the top of this. And that's clearly understandable. Okay, let's move forward a little bit. We're going to talk about 12 tasks for donor relationships. I'm going to go pretty quickly through them. Again, you can get the slides at the end if you want, but we're going to deal with this reality that you all just confirmed. Here's task number 1. It's useful to take care of yourself. And to take care of yourself, I suggest having a mantra. The mantra that I suggest for you is inward, outward, forward. Because people who work in nonprofits, people who run nonprofits, people who do fundraising for nonprofits, we carry the weight of our organization's mission on our shoulders. And how we carry it personally has everything to do with the success and the effectiveness of our organization. So as I offer you this inward, outward, forward mantra, what I mean is that inward means that you have to take care of yourself. And you have to take care of your family. You have to open up all the communications. You can't be effective if your family is not feeling supported and you're not enjoying the benefits of that support. Outward is about how you talk to your friends and your neighbors and even the members of your team. That's the outward appearance that you put on. But how do you move your organization forward? That is, how do you engage with donors and stakeholders is not just a show of outward cheerfulness or whatever. It is about moving your organization forward with purpose, and we have to get our mindset into this. And the reason I like laying out the mantra is if you take nothing else from today's webinar, inward, outward, forward, and you say, I'm going to use this to look for gaps. I'm going to look for gaps in the way that we operate. Then I'm going to show you my example. And early on, this was back in March, as I was doing this, I realized that I had a pretty significant gap when it came to outward, which is my wife and I had moved into our house about 1.5 years ago. We had left the neighborhood we had been in for 28 years. We moved to a place across town where we didn't know any of our neighbors. And so as the COVID crisis hit, I printed off and dropped this note taped it to the front door of my 10 closest neighbors here. And basically it just said was, hey, this is who we are. We're home, we're friendly, we're always willing to help. We put our contact information, cell phone, email address. And you know what? I've heard from about 6 of my neighbors who were just very appreciative that in this moment someone reached out. It's not a panacea, it's not a magic solution to anything, but inward, outward, forward, you can find something that is going to make your life easier when you fill in the gaps for yourself. Okay, here comes task number 2, which is how you take care of your team. We have to understand that running nonprofit organizations, we are able to operate because our team, our staff, has a unity of purpose. And generally, we achieve that unity of purpose, if you were to apply Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we create that unity of purpose by paying wages that cover basic needs and creating a corporate culture, if you will, that takes care of psychological needs, that makes people feel belonging. And that unity of purpose allows our organizations to function. But in this moment and for the past few months, we literally have to turn this pyramid on its head. And we have to understand that our unity of purpose is that we can't just think about the mission of our organization, that we as leaders of our organizations have to be responsible for reaching out to our team members and being particularly mindful of their psychological needs and even their basic needs. So 3 or 4 months ago, I was saying, yes, this means that we have to help our team members find supplies of toilet paper. But it also means on a psychological basis, we have to be asking, what's the stress that you're under? And is it for you? Is it for your family? Is it for your elderly parents? Is it for someone who's immunocompromised? All the reasons that someone may be having stress in their life compromises your ability to convene the unity of purpose that you need to run your organization. So flip that around and pay particular attention to your staff needs in this moment. Which gets us to point number 3 about your volunteers and how you mobilize them. Now look, in regular times, your volunteers are a community of purpose. That is, they volunteer themselves to support your mission. So obviously you have a responsibility to keep them informed and keep them involved, but I'm going to go you one more step. This is also like flipping the pyramid around. you have this opportunity to activate them as a community of care. Now, chances are they've already done this, but just in case they haven't, you might want to reach out to 3 or 4 of your best activists and just ask, hey, could you put together a checklist or a phone tree of all of our volunteers, and can you make sure that the volunteers themselves are reaching out to our whole community of volunteers and asking what kind of help you need and offering assistance that's personal and proactive and practical. And you know, I wouldn't even stop at just who your current volunteers are. Why not pull up a list of anyone who has been a volunteer with your organization for the past, I don't know, 3 years, 5 years, maybe even longer, and reach out to those people and say, hey, you know, I'm a volunteer with this organization. I know that, you know, you used to volunteer with us. We just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. How powerful would it be for one of your former volunteers or any of your current volunteers to be reached out to in that way? What does that say about you and your organization as a caring entity in your community? That's what it means to mobilize your volunteers, pure and simple. Here's task number 4. This is the time, if you haven't done it already, and I hope you have to absolutely safeguard your donor management systems. I want you to pay particular attention to how that information is backed up and where the access to servers are. Again, depending on the size of your organization, if your staff is not routinely going into the office where your server is located, what have you done to secure that server in that space? I'll tell you, I ran a nonprofit organization. We came in one morning, found a window had been broken into, and our server was stolen, and all of our files were on the server. Now, fortunately, everything was backed up. We didn't lose anything, but it was identity theft that the thieves were after. They stole nothing else. So even the physical security of your server has to be thought of in this moment. And what if it's not? What if it's not in your office? What if it's at a particular person's home? What if the access point or the authority to get into that is compromised in some way because it's on someone's computer and their kids are going into it and playing around? Or what if that person became ill and all of a sudden you didn't have access to their computer? How would you function? So all of those security measures, we can talk about this more in the Q&A. You can't, honestly, you can't be secure enough in this moment. I'm talking paper backups, extra digital backups with multiple people, back yourself up in many ways. Then think about your processes. Look, you're still fundraising in this moment, which means you're receiving deposits, you're sending thank you notes, whatever are the methods of quality control that you are responsible for under your accounting policies, you'd better be doing them. And maybe the most important assertion I'm going to make to you today is this, that in times of crisis, we don't compromise on our procedures, we depend on them. I'm going to say it again. In times of crisis, we don't compromise on our procedures, we depend on them. Don't be the kind of organization that cut corners during the early part or the midpoint or wherever we are in this crisis, only to have it come back and bite you later, where you're going to have to send out some sort of letter to all of your donors and apologize that something got screwed up. You don't want to be that organization. This is the moment where everything needs to be working smoothly. And if that means you need to take a few days and clean up your files and get all your procedures written down and make sure everyone is retrained and you're following through on everything, that is absolutely what you should be doing in this moment. Okay, enough on that lecture. Let's move on to the questions that I think you really wanted out of this, which is number 5. It's time to call your largest donors. I imagine you've already done this, but let's be clear. When I talk about your largest donors, I'm talking about that 20% of your donors who are responsible for 80% of your contributions. Those people, that's the Pareto principle. That's the same principle that says you wear 20% of your clothes 80% of the time, the 80-20 rule. So to those 20% who are so important to you, have you reached out to them in ways that are genuine and sensitive and singular? That means you're not relying on a script that 5 different people are going through and calling the same people, asking the same information. It's a personal call from whoever is the right person to be cultivating that relationship. And the essential questions you're asking are, how are you doing? How's your family? And what's your sense of the future? And where do you see needs and opportunities for our organization to be of even greater service going forward? And understand, your job isn't to change anyone's mind. Your job is to meet them wherever they are. So if you say, how are you and your family? And they go, oh, we are sick. Then stop your fundraising. Stop, you're not in donor mode anymore. You're in human mode. And what kind of help might you want to provide to them? And if you ask them what's their sense of the future and they're really negative about it, let them be negative, but don't pile on top of that. But if they're positive and you get to ask the question, where do you see opportunities? Then you're planting a seed that as you have future conversations with these donors, you're going to be the person who they're going to remember as the person who's about the future, about opportunities. This is not the time to reach out to those people and wear your desperation on your sleeve. If you call those people up and go, oh, cash flow is terrible, we're going to have to lay people off, our mission is compromised, we may not survive, that's the seed that's going to still be in that donor when you call back a week or a month from now and you want to continue the conversation. And they're going to look at your name and number on the cell phone when it comes up, and they're going to go, oh, this person brings me down. Instead, in this moment, this is your opportunity to be the person that brings them up. Talk about ways that your organization can be of even greater service going forward. Which gets us to task number 6, which is how you talk to all of your donors. And it's got to be an open dialogue. In this moment, the power of communication is so vital. And I'm just going to pull in the wisdom of the great Mr. Rogers, who in his full quote, he says, if it's human, it's mentionable. And if it's mentionable, it's manageable. So when we talk to our donors, we're not talking about putting a false face or putting a phony look or putting on airs or glossing through the situation that we're facing. We need to acknowledge the uneasiness of this. I'm calling you, I'm Skyping you, I'm talking to you in this way. I sure wish that we could be together. I wish we could have this conversation in person. So as we open up this dialogue, as we acknowledge the uneasiness, a few thoughts for you. First off, there's 3 essential messages that you might want to be using in this moment. One is, what is our organization's continuity of purpose? Those are the sentences, the paragraphs that begin, the discussions that begin, now more than ever, our organization is in need. Or you might want to be sharing the perspective of your beneficiaries, where you're helping your donors see how the world looks through their eyes. How are your beneficiaries dealing with all the challenges that we're facing? And finally, having conversations about this changed landscape that we're all experiencing, where you ask them, what more do you see? Let me give you a kind of an example of this. This is an email that I got from an organization called Families First. It's in the Boston area. I just loved this email because it was just so succinct, and I just called out 3 areas for you. Look at number 1. Right off the bat, they're saying, our team is working diligently to continue supporting families. And then they list a bunch of bullet points that they're maintaining contact. They launched a new page on their website. They're joining forces with other partners. They're rolling out new online videos. I mean, there's no rocket science here. They didn't have to think too hard about this, but they were able to show that they were moving forward. Your donors want to see that there is progress going on. And then I really love point number 3. Because of our network of supporters, we're able to pivot quickly to respond to the current situation. Do you see that they didn't even make an ask in this particular message? They're saying they're telling their donors, we already are working on your behalf to put your contributions to their best purpose. I think that's a terrific example. I mentioned before about, not wearing your desperation on your sleeve. I would just emphasize desperation is a choice. I know there are times that we have to do it. We have no choice. But actually, it really is a choice. And my thinking on this is, if you're really desperate, telling all of your donors just means that all of them are wondering, should I be putting my money into this because this thing might fail? Should I be putting good money after bad? Desperation is a choice. Take your desperation to maybe 2 or 3 of your largest donors, the people who are in a position to do something substantial about your position. But to your donors at large, my advice to you is that nobody's need to get money inspires anybody's wish to give money. And instead, offer something that's other than a yes or no choice. Ask your donors ways, give them multiple choice answers for in what ways or when they might be able to help. We're going to talk about that more in the Q&A if you want to ask about that too. All right, task number 7. This is all about creating new rituals for the changed sensibilities among us. I have a couple of examples I just pulled. So I am going to the grocery store, as I imagine you are, but now I look for that ritual. I want to see the person who is wiping down the carts before I walk into the supermarket. When I walk into a retail store, which I've done very little, it's one thing that there's a sanitation station there. I want to see the person who's coming up to wait on me. I want to see them walk over to it. I want to see them sterilize their hands before they walk up to me. That tells me I'm dealing with someone in a clean environment. And I put the Shutterfly example in here because this was a real email I got from a Shutterfly. Again, it was early. I think it was back in March. And the wording in the email was great. To our Shutterfly family, we face the uncertainty of the current moment. We're in this together. It's wonderful words, but they couldn't have picked a different picture. I mean, the change sensibility in this moment is if you're sending out a campaign or any communication to your donors, I would advise you run it by your spouse, a friend, someone who is completely not part of your organization, and just ask, am I missing anything? Because that photo sure looks like there's germs going between the hands of these kids, and that just struck me as wrong in this moment. Okay, here's task number 8. Task number 8 is about how we all have to get smarter. And my advice for you is learning is leading. And so every month you might want to be surveying 10% of your donor base and asking them the same kind of basic questions we talked about before. How are you doing? What makes our organization's mission especially important right now? Get fresh testimonials for them because those testimonials resonate in this environment. Every testimonial that you have that's more than 3 or 4 months old at this point is stale. And don't be afraid to ask all of your donors, where else do you see priority needs for our services? Let's do a little test again. Take out your cell phone one more time. Here, I'm going to give you question number 3. It's simple A, B, C, D, or E question. This is how we learn by leading. Just going to ask you just to send a 1-letter response. What's your personal level of stress right now? So if it's manageable, that's C. If it's somewhat high, it's B. If it's extremely high, it's A. If it's somewhat low, it's D. And if your stress level is extremely low right now, it's E. So, oh, good. Your answers are coming in already. 57% of you are, 63% are saying that your stress level is manageable right now. 25% of you say it's somewhat high, and 13% of you say it's extremely high. Wouldn't you like to know the mood of your donors that fast in this moment, even before you make the phone call? How would you talk to your donors differently if you understood that their stress level is manageable versus their stress level is overwhelmingly high? That's what I mean. It's easy to learn by leading. Okay, here's task number 9. Don't give up. Oh, and by the way, let me just say, I'm really impressed that 63% of you say that your stress level is manageable. It means you're doing a very good job. And it probably means your organizations are doing a good job as well. Oh, someone else just said extremely high. Good, glad you got that vote in there. Okay, I'm gonna move us forward. Task number 9, whatever you do, don't give up, because there are a few murky, muddy messes that every nonprofit is facing, and there's just no best practice answer to tell you what to do. So it's like you got to drive down this road, and there's just no choice. You're going to get stuck. You're going to get dirty. It's just going to be sloppy. So every nonprofit has special event goers, people who are going to come to events for fun reasons, and you're going to ask them if they'll still give their money because they care. It's a relationship shift. There's not an easy answer to it, but we're all trying to figure it out. We're all trying to figure out how to get our foundations and other grant makers to support us. The good news here is the level of generosity and flexibility we've seen from so many donors has been fantastic in this moment. But if you've got a particular institutional donor that is not, then this is the moment to do constructive engagement. Show them the examples of other donors. I'm going to show you a resource in a few minutes that will show you how to find other examples that you can use to get a recalcitrant foundation to be thinking a bit more in a forward-thinking manner. And then, of course, if any of you have audiences, it's very common you've been asking to convert ticket sales to contributions. My little advice for you there is don't presume charitable intent. Find ways to offer intangible value, keep them entertained. But again, there's no magic solution. People came expecting to see a show or to get some benefit. And now you're just saying, well, there's no show, but please give us your money because our need is just so great. Well, that gets us to task 10, which is about activating your vision statement. Now, look, every nonprofit that I've ever seen has a pretty clearly articulated mission statement. You know the mission statement. It's your core purpose. It unifies all the work that you do. But it's the vision statement in this moment that I think is particularly useful, because the vision statement in a nonprofit is supposed to represent the ultimate achievement of what we're working towards. So if we're the Alzheimer's Association, we understand that the mission of the Alzheimer's Association is to end that terrible disease by accelerating research and driving risk reduction and early detection and care. That's great. But maybe that work has been disrupted in this moment. How do we come back to your organization's vision statement, which was simply a world without Alzheimer's? And how does that organization respond in this moment? The same thing goes if you were to say the California Arts Council, whose mission is about strengthening arts and culture and creative expression as tools. That's that downward focus. But look, from a vision perspective, the vision was a California where all people flourish with access and participation in the arts. How would a nonprofit think differently in this moment about what access and participation in the arts would mean home-based, digital, versus what they might have thought pre-COVID? This is what I mean about activating your organization's mission statement. Give your organization, oops, sorry, I went the wrong way. Give your organization permission to live in the clouds, even for just a few minutes a day, and ask the question, what could we do to be honest and true to our vision statement in this moment, even if it's different from what our mission statement commands us to do? This is where you're going to find relevance, and your donors are going to respond to the things in your vision statement that you can actualize in this moment, which gets us to task number 11. Task number 11 is simply don't drive yourself crazy, because there are some things that have not changed. Your donors support you because they have confidence in you. You make a difference. Your organization makes a difference. You're personally significant to them in some way, and they feel a sense of meaningful connection to people or to the group. So if that hasn't changed, you also have to respect what has changed. And what's changed is your donors' capacity and urgency and their sense of priority and loyalty. And you know what? There's nothing you can do about that. So don't drive yourself crazy. Respect that, work around that, but respect it, which gets us finally to task number 12, which is about how you go about asserting your organization's relevance in this moment. And if you ask the question, is my organization positioned merely as the beneficiary of our community's generosity? I challenge you, go and pull up all the donor communications you've sent out over the last 3 or 4 months and ask the question, have we done anything more than just say, we need help, we need your money, please give now? Has it just been self-centered like that? If that's all that your asks have been, then you have positioned yourself merely as the beneficiary of your community's generosity. In this moment, to assert your relevance, my advice to you is to pursue this. What is your organization's opportunity to contribute to the recovery and health and collaborative spirit of your community? We understand that this may be in ways that are different from how you would normally operate your mission in regular times, but these are clearly not regular times. So if you can contribute to the recovery and health and collaborative spirit of your community in a way that's appropriate to the type of organization you are, your donors will understand it, they will respond to it, and you will be making a huge difference in your community as well. That's relevance. Okay, so with the finish line ahead, a couple of wrap-up comments for you. First off, if this little espresso shot of a webinar is of any use to you, if it means anything, my advice to you is take some courageous action now. I mean, today. I mean, before you have dinner tonight. Go pick up the phone or whatever is your preferred method of communication and try one of these conversations with someone and take initiative. It's been a long time since we've talked and I was wondering how you're doing. Or, hey, I'm new at this organization. I was hoping we might get to know each other. I wish I could buy you a cup of coffee, but could we have a Zoom chat? Or, hey, is there anyone that you could introduce me to? Maybe we could set up a three-way Zoom call and we could talk about this together. You could help bring us to their attention. Or, hey, would you be willing to help me think about the ways that our organization could be of even greater service? If you take any of those actions today, you get the gold star and you've made this little half hour that we've spent together really worthwhile. So I'm going to ask you, what's one thing that's working in your fundraising right now? And I'm going to tell you, I've been collecting examples from all over the country, from all kinds of nonprofits, from social service to education, conservation, animal welfare, arts and culture, religious, you name it. And I've been asking, what's one thing that's working in your fundraising? You can send it to me in email if you want. I'm happy to do everything. My email is simply matt@socialprosperity.us. But I also created a Facebook group called Crisis Engagement. And we've invited nonprofit leaders. There's like 450 nonprofit leaders from all over the country and some independent business folks as well. And we're all talking together about what's working for us right now in fundraising, in loyalty, and customer engagement. How do we learn from each other? And then if that's not enough, I'm going to ask you question number 4. So one last time on your cell phone here, let's just go ahead and put it up here. I'm going to ask you, what is one thing that's working in your fundraising right now? And good news, you're not limited to one letter or one word. You can write a whole sentence. The whole thing will come up here. But why don't you take this, before we move to the Q&A session, why don't you take a moment to share one thing that's working in your fundraising at this moment, something that maybe other people would want to consider doing as well, or some bit of learning that you've had that's particularly valuable. So thank you for the first person who broke the ice. One thing that's working in your fundraising is trust. Honest conversations with funders, I think is probably a longer way of saying trust. I think it's a great answer. Keeping social media active. I would love to talk about that more in the Q&A session. And again, we're a small enough group, maybe we can unmute folks and we can actually have a conversation about it. Checking in with donors, transparency. These are wonderful answers here. Yeah, I mean, just how we activate the thing about sustaining our donor relations is all about keeping the lines of communication open, but not freaking them out, not putting our burden on them, and instead keeping the conversation positive and forward thinking. I'm going to give you 5 more seconds. If anyone else is typing anything, hit the send button on it real quick, and then I'll move us forward. Trust, social media, honest conversations, checking in with donors, transparency, staying in contact with donors are wonderful answers to this. You know, the most important thing as we emerge from that is that there is strength in togetherness. That's what we're going to tell our donors. It's why you are a member of the Nonprofit Association of the Midlands, because we learn from each other, we support each other, and in this moment there is huge strength in togetherness. So my final comment is just to remember that we're all facing this disruption, and some of us can't even go back to offices and can't do the work, or some organizations have figured other ways to be relevant and valuable in this moment. My point to you is, we have to pick up the phone and just call our donors. We just have to do it. There's just no fancy way around it. We just have to open up that dialogue and continue it. And the essential message that we have to convey to the donors is, even if there's disruption in how we do the work, you as a donor make it possible for us to get back to that work as quickly as possible. And that's why I put the quote up from Anne Frank, because no one needs to wait even a single moment before starting to improve the world. That's what our donors need to understand. That's the urgency that they need to be valuable in this moment. Okay, I promised you a copy of the slides. This is a different phone number or different text message number, but if you want a copy of my slides, you can have them in your hands in about 30 seconds. It's really easy. To the number 66866, text the word tasks, TASKS. you'll get a bounce back message that asks for your email address. And when you get the bounce back message, send your email address, and then immediately afterwards, you'll get a bounce back message that has a link to download my slides. It has a link to the Facebook group for crisis engagement, my invitation for you to join, and it has a little evaluation form that I would frankly love for you to complete and give me your feedback on this webinar as well. I'll leave this slide up for just a second, but Abby, let me invite you back in. This would be the time to open up the conversation to questions. If people want to put them into the Zoom chat, that's good. And it looks like we have about 16 participants total. And Abby, if you want to unmute people and you just want to have a conversation, I'm open for however you want to do that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Matt. This is just like I thought since the last one, super engaging and informative. So we greatly appreciate it. Yes, as Matt said, please send any questions in the chat or Q&A. I'll be looking at both. And I am happy to unmute anyone if you would prefer to ask your question verbally. Just let me know in the chat as well. We do have a few to get started. So we talked a little bit about vision statements and kind of looking back at your mission and vision and really focusing on those. Can you kind of go into this a little more in detail and elaborate on why this is particularly important right now?
Yeah, so this is the heart of why we have vision statements in the first place. The mission statement tells us how we are moving our organization forward, what programs we're going to do, what priorities we're pursuing, when we can plan. But because we're in a moment of disruption and because we can't plan in this moment, because mission is disrupted, our organizations, nonprofit organizations necessarily need a sense of purpose. So if you are blocked, if your mission is blocked, even partially blocked in this moment, the risk that you run is that people are going to look at you and they're going to go, well, hey, if they can't save animals, or if we can't convene in the theater, or if we can't pray together, or if we can't do these things, then they don't need my support, because I'm going to put money to things that people really need, like healthcare and housing or social justice, or all the all the important things that hunger that people are dealing with right now. We have to make our organizations relevant to this moment. And so to make us relevant in this moment, we have to get out of the mindset that it's only our mission that provides relevance. Our vision provides relevance as well. This may not be the most obvious answer, but the best example I got was from a theater company that said that its vision statement was about, cultivating a sense of community. But they were prevented from rehearsing and performing. They couldn't do anything. But when they went back and they looked at what it meant to cultivate a sense of community, they realized that on the same block that they were located was a grocery store and a medical office. And they said, you know what, in this moment, we're going to go and help them. And they were helping do curbside delivery and helping restock shelves. And they said, you know what, our vision says we're going to cultivate community. And in this moment, we're cultivating community by doing this. And they went back to their donors and they said, here's how we're cultivating community in this moment. And the donors respond to that. They said, we understand the value of this theater company, and we're going to support this theater company as they cultivate community in this moment. So Abby, I turn that around to as a challenge or an opportunity to every nonprofit and say, if you're blocked from doing your mission, even just partially, go back to your vision statement and find some other way to be true to your organization's purpose and be relevant and useful and purposeful in your community. The worst thing that anyone can do is just say, you know what, we're just gonna pull back and wait and see what happens. That is the surest fire way to lose the support of your team members and your donors and your stakeholders.
That's a great example of the theater company. I really enjoy seeing how that's what nonprofits are for, is community. So it's great seeing that example. Another one came in. So you've been talking with lots of nonprofits all across the country. Can you share some examples of how nonprofits have mobilized their volunteers in particularly creative ways during this time?
Yeah, so it's a good question. And, my best answer for that is I don't know that I or any consultant is going to quite have like the list of best practices. Like, it's not like I can turn over a list of 10 things that you should be doing to activate your volunteers. It's why I created that Facebook group in the first place. And it's amazing to me, it's over 450 participants right now. And this is the perfect place to go and ask the question, what are you doing with your volunteers that's particularly notable? I'll give you an example. I think it's an example that I put in the other webinar, the how to ask for money. But there was one nonprofit that shared that early in COVID, actually it wasn't early, it was in May, they had a volunteer who offered to sew face masks and donate them to the organization. The organization then turned around and said, for any contribution of $10 or more, we're going to send you a free face mask made by our volunteers. Now, I know a lot of organizations have been struggling with what do we do with our volunteers in this moment? It hadn't occurred to, it was just so obvious, but it hadn't occurred to me until I saw that example, that simply asking your volunteers, if you could sew face masks and we will give them away to people who donate to us, that's a brilliant brainstorm that honestly, 2 seconds after I heard it, I went, how come I didn't think of that? It's like we all need to be inspiring people. There's no aha. There's just a lot of no kind of moments.
So true.
Sorry, that was my Homer Simpson. It wasn't very good.
And just a reminder, please feel free to be submitting questions in the Q&A or chat. We have a few more minutes left. On some of our other webinars, when we've been talking to donors or local community funders, they mention how if you're telling one donor something, be prepared. They are, especially in the Omaha community, donors talk, they know each other. So make sure your message is what you want everyone to know. So if you're in a situation where cash flow is really tight, payroll's coming up, other expenses are coming up, how do you get that message across without just the desperation of, I need your money now, that you might not want the whole world to know?
Yeah. Abby, you asked that question beautifully, and it's a real question. So I think I talk about this in the other webinar as well. So I won't repeat everything. You all can go back and watch that. We had a good time together. But if your ask reeks of desperation, I fear that you turn off more people than you turn on. And so that really worries me. Now, if you're really desperate, I mean, if you're about to go out of business, the bank's going to, foreclose on your building, you're going to default on your loan, whatever, then going to 2 or 3 of your major donors with board members accompanying you and saying, we just need to come clean and, and make you aware that this is our situation and it's dire and it's immediate. There's no substitute for that. I mean, you absolutely have to do that. And by the way, I've had to do that twice in my career for different organizations, and it's painful. It's just incredibly painful work to do. But on the flip side of this does that mean that you should send out an email to all 10,000 people on your email list, or all 50,000 people on your mailing list, or anyone who's ever donated to you in the last 20 years with a message that says, the sky is falling, and if we don't raise $20,000 or $50,000 in the next 30 days, we're going to go out. Again, I don't write I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm not writing prescriptions for any organization or any person in Nebraska. But I will say this, if you send out a message like that, chances are you've made 99.9% of the people look at that and go, well, it's a good thing they told me this. Now I know I won't put my good money after bad. And so I fear that you compromise your position more than you help anything. Again, I've had to do those. I've actually set out one of those campaigns once in my career, and I think I saved the day, and I made it through an extra couple of months, but it didn't solve the fundamental problem, and that organization ended up folding several months later. So, solve the structural issues, find people who are able to support you in meaningful ways, change the organization profoundly if you need to, but throwing up your hands and going, oh, we're desperate and we need your help, I think is among the worst things that a nonprofit can do. I don't mean to overstate it, but I do mean to state it pretty bluntly, that reeking of desperation is a killer in its own way. How do you feel about that, Abby? Have I said anything that's different from what other people have said?
No, that's a great answer. That's pretty much what we're hearing. We've had a few, I don't know if anyone on the call was with Grant Writing Palooza last week, but there's a few funders on that who are saying similar things, and just other funders NAM's been talking to during the pandemic of, make sure you're, as we just said with the last poll question, you're honest and open with that communication and working as well as you can with the funders, but then looking at those root issues if needed as well. So I think that's exactly what we're hearing here too.
Great. Hey, I have a question for the attendees. So I still see there are 14 of you here, and I'm glad that you stuck around, but I haven't seen one question or comment or anything on the chat. So you have to just let me know that that there's actually real people out there, and that I've just not been talking into a void for the last 45 minutes. So type something into the chat and just let us know that you enjoyed this, it was useful to you. If it was something that was particularly useful, that's great. Or if there is some lingering question or issue, or maybe I said something that you disagree with and you're skeptical about, but just, do something in the chat here so we can all see. Thank you, Treva, for acknowledging. Thank you. It's good to see there. I'm glad that you got some insight. And thank you, Anna. Appreciate the great presentation, exclamation point. Thank you, Shari. Good. Glad you got that. And thank you, Pat Fitzgerald. Glad to hear that it was useful. Phew. Abby, I was afraid that there was just you. I was just talking into the void. So I'm glad that there are actually people who are there.
Exactly. Zoom
Margaret,
great.
thank you. I'm glad you loved it. Hey, Jessica, I'm really glad you got some useful information from this as well. No one has any additional questions they want to ask? This would be your last opportunity to do it. I will say you've got my email address at matt@socialprosperity.us. So you're also welcome to send me an email afterwards if you want as well. Hey, Joe, I'm really glad you loved the webinar. I'm glad it was helpful to you.
Perfect.
See,
Thank
Abby,
you so
I just
much,
had to
Matt.
know.
I don't know. I appreciate it. That's what I was going to say. Zoom's great, but I miss the interaction that we get from in person. So appreciate everyone's comments on the chat to make us feel like we're all together at least a little bit. So again, send me last minute questions in, but thank you so much, Matt, for spending the end of your morning, beginning of our afternoon with us and sharing this information. Again, everyone, this has been recorded. I will be sending you a link to view it after, as well as some other follow-up information. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Matt. We greatly appreciate your time, and both webinars were wonderful. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Abby.
And I hope everyone stays cool and has a great afternoon.
Yeah, stays cool. Exactly. Bye-bye.
We'll see everyone later. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Margaret. Bye, Abby.
Bye. See you later.